When people demand something and willing and able to compensate for that, next thing comes the supply, where someone is able to offer that is being demanded. We dealing with supply and demand constantly in our life. Will it be relationship? Will it be applying for a job? Will it be dealing with certain materials in a school and communication with even our parents? So yeah, my name is Alex. You are watching Know the Game, and today is our 7th lecture on economics by Cambridge IGCSE. Supply. In my previous video, we reviewed demand from the economics point of view, where demand is about consumers and their buying behavior. So today it will be more about the supply and about producers, firms, business that makes goods or provide services. Same market, but different side of the story. From the economics perspective, supply is the willingness and ability of producers to offer goods and services at a certain price over a certain period of time. And yes, the period of time matters here, even though it's not in a textbook, but I will put it in this textbook, since my channel is about also entrepreneurship and marketing. So certain people who are outside of just students studying for IGCSE need to remember that. The law of supply is straightforward. The higher the price, the greater quantity supplied. Why does it make sense? Well, existing firms earn more profit if they increase production. New firms may enter the market if the price is high enough to cover their costs. Nothing mystical here. Incentive work. Money talks. Shockingly, huh? On the graph, it looks very simple. Price goes up, well, quantity supplies goes up. So, in this case, unlike the demand, the curve slopes upward, not downward like in demand, yeah? However, here comes a classic oversimplification that causes the confusion. In textbooks, the supply curve often starts with next to zero, or at very tiny friction, which can make you feel and think that, well, it starts with like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. It's not. And let me explain. No firm produces just for fun. A producer will not supply a product if the price does not cover at least minimum costs. That's why, in reality, supply curve does not start from the zero, it starts from the break-even point. So remember that visual simplicity is a teaching shortcut, not a reality. This minimum point at the curve is just a convenient minimum point which can start from even millions. For instance, if we are producing planes, yeah? We obviously will not produce a smartphone or even a plane for $1 or even zero. So, just to outline. And it's actually worth mentioning that minimum point is actually defined by the supply itself. Demand doesn't set it. Demand only reacts to it. The clarification matters. Above the break-even point, profits grow and producers have an incentive to increase the output. And the more profitable an industry becomes, the more attractive it is for new firms to enter the market. And here, I'll allow myself a small deviation from the textbook. Because you see, basic economics clearly states high profits attract new competitors. Think about it for a second. Now, compare this with the logic of the info courses and the whole success industry. If their secret methods truly generated extraordinary profits, sharing it would mean creating the competitors. From the business perspective, it doesn't make any sense. Their entire industry is not built on a real insight. It's built on a demand, yes, but on a demand and for hopes to buy easy shortcut for success. A feeling that you can be successful. Motivation. The same logic applies to the sports betting. The more obvious outcome is, the lower the odds. real knowledge is valuable precisely because no one sells it for $10 or $100 or, sorry, where's my marketing experience, for $9.99 or $99.99. And yes, I won't even start again about ceteris paribus, which I really should have emphasized more in my crypto video, because thanks to that little phrase, most graphs in crypto, forex and other casino-style markets simply don't work the way people think they do. So, what can we say about the graph of the supply here? Well, first of all, movement along the curve. Again, contraction. Smaller quantities, extension, higher quantities. Smaller quantities, higher quantities. Alright, that's established. And obviously, that's related to a price factor. Cheaper is the item, less we want to produce. More expensive is the item, more we want to offer to the market. But same as demand, supply have its own non-price factors, and in previous book it was described with the acronym 2 tips. Current book decided to switch from it already, but allow me, a very conservative person, to still stick to it. And later on you will find out why. First factor would be obviously time. The shorter time period, the fewer options producers have to increase, well, the output. For example, a farmer cannot suddenly grow more grain just because the price has increased. Over the time, production can be expanded, but in the short run, supply is limited. So, short run, supply is not flexible, inflexible, and long run, supply becomes more flexible. Same price signal, very different result, because time matters. Second factor is weather, and it's very obvious factor when it comes to the agriculture. For instance, good weather, higher harvest, supply increases. Very bad weather, well, next to non-harvest, and obviously that decreases the supply dramatically. But it's not only about farming. Weather can disrupt transport and logistics. If goods cannot reach the market, effective supply falls even if production itself hasn't changed. And yes, obviously, on the graph, if we have bad weather, well, supply curve shifts left. If the weather is more convenient, it will shift more towards right. Third factor, opportunity cost. For some reason in the new book, this part being called prices of other products, which makes more logical sense, though I would still prefer opportunity cost for a reason. Producers constantly ask a basic question: what is more profitable product right now to produce? If the price of another product rises, resources may be redirected there. A simple example, a farmer grows potatoes, but corn prices suddenly increase sharply. The farmer may switch from potatoes to corn, because now corn is more profitable to produce, right? Factor number 4, taxes. When the government increases the taxes, well, this affects the production costs, right? They rise. In textbooks, the logic is pretty simple. Higher taxes, higher costs. Higher costs, lower the supply. Supply curve shifts left. And if taxes are reduced, or maybe we are subsidized, in this case costs fall, supply increases, and supply curve shifts to right. Ceteris paribus. And here I want to emphasize a very important momentum, so-called reality check. In real life, taxes come in many forms. Excise taxes, import tariffs, VAT, value-added tax. They don't always directly affect production costs. Sometimes they affect consumers more, or influence what countries buy and sell internationally. But obviously, within a school-level economics model, we simplify things and focus on how taxes affect the supply. Alright? So, and one more important point, like in advance, taxes are not only about collecting money, they are also a tool for market control. And soon we will get to that with you. Remember the farmers in my previous example who switched from the potatoes to the corn. The government could use taxes to push them back towards the potatoes, for example, by increasing tax specifically on the corn production. Same market, same producers, different incentives. Number 5, innovations. Latest technology as per new book. Technology improves, simplifies, and often makes production cheaper. That can be automation, faster networks, better software, smarter machines, anything that makes work more efficient and reduces the cost per unit. If production becomes cheaper and more efficient, firms can produce more and they are willing to supply more. So, technology improves, costs fall, supply increases. Supply curve shifts right. Ceteris paribus. Number 6. Obviously, supply affected by the cost of production. If inputs become cheaper, well, let's say raw materials, electricity, fuel, components, labor all of a sudden became cheaper, then our supply curve shifts right, because cost of productions are down. Well, and therefore, we can offer the product even for cheaper money. All right. But it works vice versa. If cost of production increased, well, we need to increase the price, yeah? And we know how demand works, right? Price-wise, they react not positively on price increase. Then maybe we need to slow down the production and produce less. Here, Cambridge previously outlined the subsidies as a separate thing, well, to make it 2 tips. And therefore, subsidy obviously works the same as taxes, but in different arrangement, yeah? If taxes were increasing the price, subsidies obviously decreasing the price. And usually government does it for education and training, healthcare, public transportation especially, or green energy. Well, depending what is trendy, what is modern agenda, okay? So, basically what subsidies do, they reduce production costs and therefore work similarly, yeah? Cost of production previously shifted, our supply to the right, and here same done by subsidies. They shift our supply curve to right because it's cheaper to produce now, right? Cost of productions are done. But if we will take away the subsidies, obviously this push our supply curve to the left. Now let's summarize what IGCSE program actually wants us to remember. First of all, supply increase. It's always about supply curve shifting to the right. Well, quantities increase here, right? And for the every given price, we have more higher quantity now. What happens when the supply decreases? Well, our supply curve shifts left. For the any given price, comparing to the original one, we have much fewer quantity. Simple as that. But it's really worth noticing. This is not the same if the firm supplying a bit more because the price have increased. That would be just movement along the curve. So in this case, exponential, yeah, or supplying less because the price decreased, then it will be contraction. So shift is different. It means a new level of supply for the whole market at every price, okay? The new moments that outlined in the book, which were not previously mentioned. First of all, these are disasters and wars. Well, we did mention bad weather previously, but here it really makes sense because we're living right now in a world where variety of disasters and wars do happen, and it obviously affects the supply. How can somebody can produce and produce even more when there's like rockets and bombs falling around the place, yeah? Because obviously it affects and cost of production and availability of resources, and that's what actually another new thing that is outlined in the book. Depletion of resources, because of course, how we can produce more? And obviously the supply will shift most likely left when the resources are depleting or about to be depleted, and there's a less and less of them are available on the market. So that's addition of the new book. And here comes the interesting example we had in our older book, which I still want to keep in my scenario. In March 2011, Japan was hit by a major tsunami, one of the worst natural disasters in the country's history. It reduced production for large companies like Sony, Panasonic, Toyota and Honda. And this wasn't just a temporary drop in output, it was a real leftward shift of the supply curve, because production capacity itself became limited, because it was destroyed by the disaster. One disadvantage from my point of view in the new Cambridge IGCSE material, I would believe that they first of all took away the momentum like ceteris paribus from the supply, because in previous book we never had ceteris paribus in demand but already was mentioned in supply, but also renamed other product, because opportunity cost sounded better. Why? Because it considered one interesting factor. What factor is this? Entrepreneurship factor. You see, one of the reasons why supply had logical reason for mentioning ceteris paribus, in demand it's quite straightforward, while in business there's a lot of things changing even more rapidly than in demand, and especially that's enterprise decision, which can shift things dramatically without given logic now because of the strategical plan of the enterprise. Well, after all, Cambridge IGCSE is not teaching you entrepreneurship and marketing, but I am, and therefore, yeah, I had to outline this. Anyway, let's get back to actual IGCSE program. And next thing that IGCSE tells us is that, well, just like demand, supply have market supply and individual supply, where individual supply is how much one actual producer is willing and able to supply for each price, obviously. So market supply is basically all individual suppliers added together. And here comes the old textbook example. Yeah, feeling myself like an old guy, very conservative, and using the only old examples. At the price 300,000, Airbus is willing to produce 300 aircrafts, and Boeing is willing to produce 320. So that's two individual supplies, but the market supply in the end is 620. And here comes the key point. In economics, you must always include time period, because saying Airbus will produce 300 planes means nothing unless we clarify per year, per quarter, or even over the 10 years. And here's my personal example to make it really clear. For instance, I can make 100 YouTube videos, and the question then comes like, within what period of time? It truly matters, because if I'm planning to do it in whatever amount of years, it's irrelevant, right? Okay, I will say I can make them in 1 year. Now it sounds more impressive, right? Though, here comes the interesting thing. Even within my personal 100 videos, there is also individual supply. Let me break it down, because I do channel not only in English, but also in Russian. So it's already, let's say, 50-50 in this case. And then people are like, okay, if especially they're studying IGCSE Cambridge, then they will be confident that within a year I will cover everything that they need as per their syllabus. But guys, here comes another momentum. In my channel, I also do videos about entrepreneurship, marketing, and other business or not so business related topics. Therefore, within a time frame of 1 year, which consists of variety of these individual supplies, 100 is no longer sounds so impressive and so promising, for especially for those who are yet to complete the whole IGCSE course. And that becomes very important and essential when it comes to individual and market supply. And this is exactly how market works. You must consider all the producers and the time period. Otherwise, numbers are meaningless. And yes, this is where we will finish our video about the supply as per Cambridge IGCSE program. And still, few more videos will be theoretical, but it will be very essential theory. It will be the base, because later on we will get to interesting topics where this base will play a very essential role. But that's in my further videos. So far, I have to say a lot of thanks to those guys who actually watch this channel to this particular moment. I would highly appreciate your likes, I will highly appreciate your comments, and subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss my next video. But for now, thanks a lot for watching, it was a pleasure. Auf Wiedersehen, sayonara. Well, Sakal Hazazian.